Coming up on this episode of Booked on Rock, it's the story of Megadeth with author Greg Prato.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich. Author Greg Prato back with a brand new book, this one titled The World's State of the Art Speed Metal Band, The Megadeth Story, 1983 to 2002. Greg, welcome back.
Eric, hello. Now, I know I've asked this before, but I have to have set the record for the guest with most appearances, right, on Booked on Rock?
I think. I got to do an official count, but you have to be.
Is there like some kind of prize or something I'm going to receive? Or?
There's a prize. You get a jacket. You get the velvet jacket, which you can't wear because it's too hot where you are and it's too hot where I am. You're in Long Island.
There's something that I know we talked about last time, but I could really use a pair of David Lee Roth's buttless leather chaps if you could maybe hook me up with that.
Yes, that would work very well. That would actually, isn't Dave coming around your way? His solo?
He is. Yeah. Would you believe it? Like sold out. That show sold out very, very fast.
Good for him, man.
Yeah,
Diamond Dave still doing his thing. Still doing his thing. So let's talk about Megadeth. For this book, a lot of interviews, some interviews from before, but there's some exclusive interviews just for this book?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. What it is I've interviewed a lot of the members of Megadeth over the years for all the sites I write for, and also for some of the books I've done. I've interviewed Dave Mustaine several times. David Ellefson I've spoken to the most. I must have interviewed him like at least 10 times over the years. I've also interviewed Chris Poland, Marty Friedman, Mike Klink, who produced Rest in Peace, and of course also Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. But yeah, then I did a bunch of brand new interviews for this as well. I interviewed KK Downing of Judas Priest. I interviewed Richard Christy from the Howard Stern Show, who's also a great drummer, and he's a longtime fan of also Megadeth. I also interviewed Ricky Rackman, the former host of the MTV show called Headbangers Ball. Don Jameson. I also interviewed a gentleman named Paris Mayhew, who was the guitarist for the band The Cro-Mags. And the Cro-Mags played some shows on a great bill. It was Motorhead, Megadeth, Cro-Mags, and that was when Megadeth was touring in support of Peace Sells, which is my favorite album of theirs. So that would have been a fantastic bill to catch. But yeah, but those are there's probably one or two people that I'm overlooking right now. But yeah, I kind of merged kind of like archival interviews with some of the interviews I've done over the years, with also some brand new interviews, and also some pretty cool pictures I was able to get as well.
Yeah, a lot of great photos. Dave Mustaine, of course, is the guy when we talk about Megadeth. Chapter 1 gets into his story. He had a pretty tough childhood, right? His dad was an alcoholic. Could be rough on him and his mom. And his life had a sad ending. He went from being the West Coast branch manager of Bank of America to working on cash registers because of his alcoholism. And then he died at 56 of a brain aneurysm. And sadly, Dave didn't learn from his father's demise, right? At least not right away.
Yeah, which is sad. I mean, you would think that if you see what happened to your father and just how his father treated him so badly at certain points as well, due to, I'm sure it was due to his alcoholism, and also the way that his father was also treated when his father was young too. He talks about that he was also abused by his father as well. So yeah, it was just kind of passed down from generation. I mean, just not the abuse, but just the, I guess, alcoholism. Because yeah, in the 80s, Dave himself got strung out on heroin, and he also had a drinking problem as well. It actually wasn't just heroin. He talks about in the book, there's a quote where he makes like a long list of all these drugs he was on when he finally was going to get serious about getting clean, when he checked into the rehab facility. They had him make a list of all the drugs he was on. It was like a laundry list. It was like, it's insane that he was able to, that he's like still living pretty much from all the drugs he's done.
And that did affect his status with Metallica, as we know. That's the story that most people know about. A lot of drinking when he was in the band, and he had a volatile temper. He got into fights defending his bandmates, but also with bandmates, right? He punched James Hetfield.
He did, yeah. There's a famous story that Dave Mustaine had a dog, and because he was supposedly dealing drugs at the time, and his dog he was using for protection as like a watchdog. So the dog, I think, was going on Ron McGovney's car and maybe scratching it or something like that. And Ron McGovney's Metallica's original bassist. and Ron and James didn't particularly care for that. And I think the story goes that James may have kicked the dog, and that really pissed off Dave. So he wound up, punching James Hetfield in the mouth. And I think, they got into a big fight. But that was not when Dave Mustaine was thrown out. He actually stayed in the band for a while longer after that, because that was before even Cliff Burton was in the band. So that may have been like maybe 6 months before he was kicked out. But one thing that people don't really talk about, and I talked a little bit about this in the book, is, I'm a fan of Metallica like everyone else is. But people tend to let them off the hook the way that they mistreated Dave Mustaine. If you think about it, they made him drive it was a U-Haul attached to it was a James Hetfield's truck attached to a U-Haul or something like that. The whole band drove from West Coast to East Coast under horrible conditions. They almost died when they hit some kind of icy road or something like that. So and then Dave Mustaine talks about that that some people, part of their group, had to stay inside the U-Haul, and it was pitch black and not even heated. So that's like a horrible existence. So they make Dave Mustaine and everyone drive from the West Coast to the East Coast, and then shortly after they get there, they fire him and send him back in on a bus. Meanwhile, they're flying Kirk Hammett through the air through to New York. You would think maybe they shouldn't have made Dave Mustaine come all the way out to the East Coast just to fire him. And if you're going to fire him, maybe try to scrape up enough money to at least fly him back and not have to, because if you think about that, must be totally torturous to be in a bus for that long, thinking about how you fucked up and everything like that. And, Dave Mustaine's famous quote, which I talk about in the book, is when they told him he was fired, his first question was, what, no second chance? Which I think is a pretty valid question on his part.
The way they fired him was described by Lars as almost being like execution style. Talk about the day they fired Dave, how they went about that.
Well, what it is, behind Dave Mustaine's back, they already had it lined up that Kirk Hammett knew he was either trying at, or maybe he already had the gig. They're already scheming how he was going to come out and everything like that. Because at the time, Kirk Hammett was in the band Exodus, which was obviously a very popular and also legendary thrash metal band from also the Bay Area and San Francisco. And so they had. So Dave Mustaine wakes up one morning, the whole band is around him. They're like, look, you're fired, pack up all your shit. Your bus leaves in like an hour or something like that. And then Dave Mustaine's, his first question was, what, no second chance? And they're like, no, you're out. So then they just drove him to the bus terminal. And while this is going on, I would imagine Kirk Hammett's in the air at that point, flying to New York. He lands, they get to their rehearsal space in Queens, New York. And he tries out, and he gets the gig right away. So that all happened within 24 hours, if you could believe that.
There may be two sides to Mustaine's firing, but there's no denying what his contributions were to Metallica.
No, you're right. Yeah, the thing is, too,
he's on the first album.
He didn't play on the first album, but a bunch of his songs, he has co-writes on the first album, the second album, and he's claimed that he co-wrote at least one song on Master of Puppets, but he did not receive proper credits for that. But he's never, to the best of my knowledge, he's never taken him to court over that. So that kind of leads me to believe that it's either not true or there's no way to prove if it was true or not. But his thing when he got fired, his only request was that he didn't want them to use any of his music, because I guess his thought was that he was going to use it for whatever his next project was going to be. But like I talk about in the book, I mean, that's obviously a blessing in disguise that they used his material, because he obviously got paid over the years for the sale, or for the publishing or whatever, from Kill 'Em All and also Ride the Lightning, that have sold millions and millions of copies. So ultimately, I think it probably worked out probably for the best for him.
Yeah, I thought for some reason he might have been on a track or two from that first one.
No. See, that's one of the big, what ifs or big tragedies in rock, is that for me personally, my favorite Metallica lineup was the Hetfield, Mustaine, Burton, Ulrich lineup. That to me was like the American Black Sabbath right there. That's how, just totally amazing that lineup was, I think. But they fired him like right before they were going to go into the studio to record Kill 'Em All. In fact, they instructed Kirk Hammett to pretty much just copy a lot of Dave Mustaine's solos. If you go back and listen to some of the early Metallica demos, he's pretty much just copying what Dave Mustaine is doing solo-wise at that point.
So Megadeth, Dave admits, this was a way to get revenge on his Metallica bandmates, former Metallica bandmates. How does Megadeth form? It's a short-lived early lineup.
Yeah, well, there's a famous story. So he comes home. He's living in an apartment, and one day he's hungover and he's woken up by a gentleman upstairs. Or let me think. It's the gentleman would have been directly below Dave Mustaine. He hears him playing he's a bassist, obviously, and he's playing the opening riff to Van Halen's "Running with the Devil," but very, very loud. And Dave Mustaine says that's the worst bass riff you could possibly hear if you're hungover in the morning. So he hears that at deafening volume, and he's probably yelling, "Shut up, shut up." He's not, the guy below him is oblivious. So Dave Mustaine grabs a potted plant and throws it down one level below, and it crashes on I guess the AC unit, the little metal fixture, and it crashes. So whoever's playing it finally gets the idea. All right, stop. Then shortly thereafter, maybe like a few days later, he gets a knock at the door and he opens it up. And he didn't know at that point that it was the guy playing the bass and also another gentleman. And they asked Dave Mustaine, "Do you know where I can buy some cigarettes?" And Dave Mustaine says, "Cigarettes? Just go down to the next, the closest fucking deli." Like, what kind of bullshit? And he just closes the door. And then he hears a second knock. Opens it up. It's the same guy. He's like, "Can you tell me where I could buy some beer?" And Dave Mustaine goes, "Now you're talking." So then, so one of those gentlemen, the guy who was playing the bass below, was none other than David Ellefson, who we all know went on to become a big part of the whole Megadeth story. He was a longtime bassist, co-wrote a lot of the material, came up with some great iconic bass lines. And so that's pretty much, so they connect, they go through a bunch of members over the next year or so, including it was a short-lived lineup featuring Kerry King of the band Slayer. He was briefly in Megadeth early on.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And they finally get the definitive lineup, my favorite Megadeth lineup, which is Dave Mustaine on vocals and guitar, David Ellefson on bass, Chris Poland on guitar, and Gar Samuelson on drums. Now, Chris Poland and also Gar Samuelson, their background is jazz fusion. It's not metal. And they had a whole interesting element to what makes Megadeth totally unique. If you listen to Peace Sells or even the first album, which is called Killing Is My Business, compared to any of the other big four of thrash, they have a totally different vibe. It's like a very speedy fusion-y type thing, which I absolutely love. And to me, that's, again, it's one of those what if tragedy type things, because Dave Mustaine was able to catch lightning in a bottle twice. He got a lineup together that was as good in my mind as Metallica, but then they only lasted for just 2 albums, because after Peace Sells, Chris Poland and Gar Samuelson are excused due to drug addiction and also some other stuff going on behind the scenes.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
No! No, come back!
And the band name Megadeth, that can be traced back to that bus ride that Dave was on from the East Coast back to the West Coast right after he's fired by Metallica.
Yes, he comes across a pamphlet. I think it was a governor. I believe his name was Alan Cranston or something Cranston. Definitely not Bryan Cranston, the gentleman from Breaking Bad. Right? But and it was a pamphlet, and I believe the phrase said, "The arsenal of Megadeth can't be rid, they say." That was the quote. And Megadeth spelt, of course, at the time was Megadeath, but Dave Mustaine shortens it to Deth. That was their trademark with their band name. And so ultimately they wound up going with that because Dave Mustaine's quote is like, "I was running a band called Metallica. Like, how am I it's impossible to get heavier than Metallica. You already have Iron Maiden, Metallica. Like, what other kind of metal are you going to use?" And then he realized Megadeth is pretty bloody extreme if you think about it.
Oh, that's a perfect name.
Yeah, it is.
That debut album came out June 12th, 1985. Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. What kind of response did it get from fans and critics at that point?
Yeah, it was pretty popular in the metal underground. At the time, there was a lot of tape trading going on, especially with thrash bands. 1985 is just when a lot of those bands started signing with major labels. You had Anthrax signing with Island, Metallica signing to Elektra. That was actually 1984, but in 1984 they're signed to Elektra. Slayer was in the process of signing to, I forget who they were signed to, but they wound up getting dropped before even their first album came out, and then they quickly signed to Def Jam through Rick Rubin. And ultimately, because of the popularity of Killing Is My Business, which came out on the Combat label, which was a metal indie label, through the popularity of that, they got to deal with Capitol Records. So that's in early '86, and that's later in '86 is when Peace Sells comes out.
Yeah, you see their ascent as the years go on. The first album reached 169 on Billboard. Then we see 1986's Peace Sells, But Who's Buying reached 76. 1988, So Far, So Good, So What reached 28. 1990's Rust in Peace, 23. And their highest charting album is 1992's Countdown to Extinction.
Do you know what album kept Countdown to Extinction out of the number one slot?
This would have been 1992. Was it For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge?
Close, close,
Okay.
close. The gentleman's name, okay, I got it. Billy Ray Cyrus, Some Gave All. Or
Oh,
Some
God.
Gave Their All, or something like that. Yeah, with that horrible Achy Breaky Heart song.
Oh, my God.
So, I mean, out of everything, it'd be one thing if it was like Led Zeppelin 4 or like the first Van Halen album keeping out of the number one spot. But that piece of shit album keeps Megadeth's Countdown to Extinction out of the top spot. So that, that just,
Wow.
I definitely feel for Dave Mustaine with that one.
Yeah, so it went all the way to number 2.
Yeah.
But Dave and Megadeth, they couldn't shake the media always bringing up the whole Megadeth versus Metallica story. They ran with that. How did Dave handle that in the comments Metallica were making about him?
Going through a lot of the old articles and quotes like that, it's like almost every month or every year, it was totally different. You had some eras where they're getting along, then other eras where they hate each other. Some eras where Dave Mustaine can't stand Kirk Hammett and thinks he's a horrible guitarist. Other eras where he's praising Kirk Hammett's playing. So you could just flip through my book, and whatever chapter you land on, it's probably going to be totally different. At that point, it's a guess as to who's on good terms at that point or not. On both sides, they were kind of slinging mud back and forth. It seemed like it was pretty much a lot to do with the media, though. From people that I interviewed and also from some of the past interviews, even from like photos, you'd see Lars Ulrich backstage at Megadeth shows and things like that. In fact, David Ellefson, who I interviewed, he's someone I interviewed. I should have mentioned him. He was one of the top interviews I did for the book, the longtime bassist of Megadeth. He tells a great story that shortly after Cliff Burton died, which this would have taken place in October '86 because Cliff Burton died in late September '86. Megadeth was playing a venue in the San Francisco area, and Metallica were now suddenly off the road because their tour got postponed because of what happened. And Lars Ulrich comes to the show. I think the bill was Exodus and also Megadeth. And they're backstage, and David Ellefson's like, "Oh man, like I'm sorry to hear what happened. Like, what's going on?" And I think Lars Ulrich, mentioned that they're going to start trying people out, and he turns to David Ellefson, and he's like, "Fuck, man, do you want a gig?" Meaning, they were going to possibly try him out, but that never took place at that point. But David Ellefson did mention it to Dave Mustaine, and that didn't sit very well with Dave Mustaine. He's like, what the hell are you trying to steal my, bassist? So that happened in '86. Then we talk about in 2001 when Jason Newsted left Metallica. They reached out to Dave Mustaine and said, "Look, we're trying out bassists. Can we reach out to David Ellefson?" At that point, Dave Mustaine said yes, but that tryout never took place either. So it was two semi-close calls for David Ellefson and Metallica.
Has there ever been an occasion where Mustaine was on stage with Metallica?
Yes. When they did the Big Four shows a few years back,
Okay.
they had a jam at the end where they played Am I Evil, the Diamond Head classic. And he came out, and they all jammed on that. There's also, like I said, there are photos of them, like of Lars Ulrich backstage. Like I know when Megadeth played the Castle Donington Monsters of Rock in 1988. There's photos of Lars Ulrich backstage with Megadeth and also members of Guns N' Roses, because Guns N' Roses was on that bill. And I could swear seeing photos at the time, maybe in like Metal Hammer or Kerrang, of Lars Ulrich on stage during Megadeth's set, maybe singing backup vocals or something like that. It's kind of like a hazy memory. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't think Dave Mustaine ever jumped on stage with Metallica and jammed or anything until those Big Four shows, which would have been about probably 10 years ago at this point.
But nowadays, it seems like they're pretty cool with each other now.
It's funny. And
They're
I talk
much
about this in the
older.
book.
I mean,
Yeah, well,
they
what
were
it is?
kids back then when all that shit went down.
I talk about it in the book. I interviewed Dave Mustaine a while back. I asked him how things are currently between you and also the guys in Metallica. And he said he pretty much said they weren't on speaking terms because you know how a few years back Metallica reissued all their albums as these huge mammoth deluxe box sets. Do you remember that?
Yep.
They were going to issue one of Dave Mustaine's demos that he did with Metallica, or maybe all the demos he did with Metallica, as a very big box set. But the only thing is, Dave Mustaine wanted his big beef with Metallica was he never got proper credit, or he was kind of cut out a little bit for songs that he wrote. Like, for instance, he claims, I think it was him and James Hetfield wrote all of the song Metal Militia. But when Kill 'Em All came out, suddenly Kirk Hammett's name was on it. So he's like, what the fuck? Like, how is he getting part of my money that I'm entitled to? I wrote the song. Like, what the hell? So he then, when they were talking about that, putting out that big deluxe box set, Dave Mustaine was, I think, talking to James Hetfield. He's like, yeah, look, it would be great to do. It's a great idea, but this is an opportunity now to finally get everything, corrected with who, the songwriting and everything. And he was pretty much just told, no, the deal is we're going to keep it the way it is. We're just, and then Dave Mustaine was like, you know what, you can go fuck yourself. So that led to them. Yes, that led to that. So that never came out, that deluxe box set. And that also, at that point, when I spoke to Dave Mustaine, I believe it was for the Consequence of Sound site I was interviewing him for. He said that he was not on speaking terms with them. Then I spoke with him not even like a year later, I think, for the same site. And he said, yeah, everything's fine now. We're all, we're all on talking terms. Yeah, everything's fine. So who know? I mean, right now, who knows what, if they're on good terms or bad terms? It seems like which way the wind blows, pretty much.
Yeah, it seems the same as it was before. It depends on, the time you ask Dave what he thinks. Yeah.
Similar, I guess you could say, to David Lee Roth and also Van Halen, right? Like in the late 70s, early 80s, they were one for all for one. Then they hate each other. Then they're trying to get together. They can't get together. Who knows?
And remember when they removed Michael Anthony's image from the albums on Van Halen's website?
Yeah, similar. That's similar to when Sharon Osbourne deleted Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake off those first two Ozzy albums.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think Deep Purple they briefly did that with Richie Blackmore's likeness on either a shirt or something that had the Machine Head image on it. I remember like a while back I remember reading someplace on the internet, like there were fans that weren't very happy with that, but I think that was just like a passing thing, if that ever even happened at all. That seems like I may have heard something like that.
Well, one last quick thought on Van Halen before we get back to, obviously, Megadeth. That's what we're talking about. But I would love to see one day Dave, Mike, and Alex just get together, whether it be on stage or not. It'd be just cool to see those three guys at least bury the hatchet.
Yeah, the problem now, like what we saw at the Ozzy show, is they're getting kind of old. So, I mean, Roth can still cut it. Michael Anthony's still out there. But from what I could see, it seems like Alex Van Halen, I don't know if he can really, he's not going to be as powerful as he once was. And
well, that's why I say, even if it's not on stage, just for the three to get together again before it's too late.
Yeah,
give Michael some closure, because Michael Anthony.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's like weird too how when Alex Van Halen was doing all the publicity for when his book came out, he was saying, "Oh, the first person that called me after news broke of Eddie Van Halen dying was actually Dave." Or no, the first person he called was Dave. But then you hear, so you hear that, it's like, all right, good. So now they're like on good terms. Then you hear Alex Van Halen saying, we tried to do a tribute tour to Eddie, and David Lee Roth refused to even mention Eddie, and we almost got into a fight. So, I don't know. These guys would just never get along.
Whichever way the wind blows, just like with
Yeah.
Megadeth. The world's state-of-the-art speed metal band, The Megadeth Story, 1983 to 2002, is the name of the book. Greg Prato is the author. Did your wife do that cover?
She did.
The
There you go.
legendary Greg Prato.
Yeah, she is. She is very talented. She's a art teacher, she's very fluent with Photoshop and all that stuff. So yeah, she's always a great big help with designing covers.
Yep, always does a great job. So you note that the noticeable artistic leap forward for Megadeth is between that first and second album. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I mean, when you go from a indie that doesn't have that much money, then to suddenly on a major label which has a lot of money, you can spend money on like either remixing or making it sound better. What's funny enough is the Peace Sells album was already recorded. It was going to come out on Combat, but once they signed with Capitol, Capitol liked it so much, which obviously it's gone on to be considered a classic metal album. I totally understand why they would want to put it out. So I believe they hired someone to remix it, and just the remixing alone definitely sounds like a much better album than their first one. But material wise, it was just a quantum leap forward. They sound tighter. They toured obviously in that interim period. They obviously totally jumped over the whole sophomore slump thing because their second album blows away the first one. And yeah, Dave Mustaine sings better. They're playing better. The tempos are tighter. The material is great. We have one of the all-time classic bass intros to, of course, the title track "Peace Sells," which not too many people. Some people know this, but to confirm it, Dave Mustaine wrote that bass little part. It wasn't David Ellefson, although of course it was David Ellefson that played it. Yeah,
that's cool.
But that was David Ellefson talks about in the book. They were at I think rehearsal one day, and Mustaine picked up his bass and was just like noodling around. He's like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And he played do 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 do. It's like, yeah, it's great.
Do you remember MTV used that, right? For their
yes,
MTV
we talk
news?
about that. Of course, it is in the book, and we talk about how I asked Dave Mustaine. I said, "So, have you ever seen any money from that?" He says, "Not a penny," because MTV. What they realized is if you play something for, I'm just making up a number, but say for 4 seconds, you don't have to pay. If it was 5 seconds, they would have had to pay.
Wow. See, that's interesting because copyright is something I really study quite a bit. It's why I don't play any music on this podcast because I kept getting pulled down for copyright on my old podcast. And there was always that theory that if you played just 5 seconds of a song, it's okay. But I talked to a copyright lawyer and he's like, no, that ain't happening. But that could be different with what that situation was for television. I'm not sure.
It's an interesting situation just because now we're just totally jumping around.
We're jumping around here.
Is the theme song for the old hit TV show Jackass was a song called Corona by the punk band called Minutemen.
Okay.
And I remember once reading, you would think that since that, and they used not the whole song, like that song, not too many people know. There's a whole other half of that song actually has singing and also lyrics to it. But Jackass just used the first half of that song. But I always assumed that the surviving members, because the singer of the Minutemen died, but the bassist and the drummer are still around. I always assumed that they probably had a pretty big payday from that being used. But I think I read once that they haven't seen anything because either publishing, I don't know if they signed away the publishing or what the hell the story was, but I don't think those guys ever saw money from that, which is robbery, if you ask me.
Yeah, that could be it, publishing whoever has it.
Yeah.
The Booked on Rock podcast will be back after this.
I think you'd be glad later if you weren't here now.
The song In My Darkest Hour was written about Cliff Burton after his untimely death. Mustaine picked up the guitar, wrote the song in one fell swoop, as he said it. You mentioned in the book that you were semi-responsible for causing a bit of an uproar amongst metalheads concerning Cliff Burton's passing. What the hell did you do?
Yes, that is true. Well, I just wanted just to back up a little bit. That song, Cliff Burton's passing, inspired the music. The lyrics are not about Cliff Burton's passing.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, but it is correct what you just said, that Dave Mustaine gets the horrible phone call that your old friend Cliff Burton, because he was still friendly with Cliff Burton even after the split. They were still on good terms. Phone call, Cliff is dead, and he just hung up the phone in shock, picks up his guitar, and writes one of Megadeth's all-time classic songs, which is, of course, In My Darkest Hour. But so I did create a bit of a brouhaha in the whole metal press about maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I was interviewing Scott Ian, guitarist of the band Anthrax, and I just happened to, I was watching, I believe on YouTube, Dave Navarro from the band Jane's Addiction had like a short-lived podcast or a TV show or something, and he had Dave Mustaine on, and there was a passing mention of that they were going to fire Lars Ulrich on the tour that Cliff Burton died prior to Cliff Burton dying. Like that was the plan, that So like I heard that and I was like, yeah, what is that about? And then I found out a while later, oh, I have the opportunity to interview Dave Mustaine. So this was for Rolling Stone. This is what this is definitely for Rolling Stone.
Okay.
I've been doing Dave Mustaine for Rolling Stone. I'm like, Dave, I heard this one thing. Maybe you can clarify it. And I asked him about it, and he's like, wait a second, how the hell did you hear about that? I'm like, oh, well, I told him I was listening to this Dave Navarro thing you mentioned. He's like, oh, okay, okay. And then he just spills his guts. And he's like, yeah, what happened was Scott Ian told me he was on tour with Metallica because Anthrax was opening up for Metallica on that tour that sadly Cliff Burton died. He said, James Hetfield or Cliff, I think I forget which one, told Scott Ian like, yeah, look, don't tell anybody because they were all very close with Scott Ian. They went way back with Scott Ian. They're like, look, don't tell anybody, but when this tour is over, we're going to go home. We're firing Lars Ulrich. It's just over between us and him. Even if we can't retain the Metallica name, who cares? It's just going to be us three carrying on. It's over for Lars Ulrich. Then, of course, Cliff Burton dies, and I remember when Scott Ian saw James. I may have been at Cliff Burton's funeral or wake, or whenever he saw James Hetfield next. He's like, "So what's going on with that thing you told me?" He's like, "Oh no, now that's just over. We can't. We're just going to go on with what we have." And that's when they got Jason Newsted, and they just carried on. But for like a week, I remember that was like the talk of the metal press on like Blabbermouth and Brave Words and all those sites. And in fact, so much so that Scott Ian put out a book. I think it's called I'm the Man. And he even talks about it. He doesn't mention me by name, but he's like, yeah. And then like there was an interview and blah, blah, blah. And like, all this stuff. And like I get dragged into it because, Scott Ian, because the thing was Scott Ian told me this. So then Scott Ian gets dragged into it. So that was a whole, yeah. So
Your name comes up a lot. I think I emailed you, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I was watching something on YouTube. It was a great documentary on Alice in Chains.
uh-huh.
And they were getting into those sad last months, years of Lane Staley's life.
Yeah, yeah.
And your name came up in there somewhere. The host said something about, according to Greg Prato.
Yeah, it was probably from my earlier book called Grunge is Dead because there was a whole section in that. And you know what? I don't mind people quoting my books and stuff, but just my only request is please just credit me. It's all because there's been times on YouTube where it just quotes from things that I've done. And I remember one guy I had to get in contact with. I'm like, hey, I don't care that you're quoting me, but at least mention where the hell you got the quote from. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. And then he did. And I was like, all right, good. I'm glad you. I mean, I don't know, but,
well, you did the interview.
Yeah,
but
I know.
The other thing is sometimes they say Greg Prato, and I want to email the
Yes.
person like, no, it's Prato.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna give you an exclusive for this podcast.
Oh,
Okay?
here we go.
Okay. Something that I've never shared is I believe the correct pronunciation of my last name is actually Prato, because it was
Prato.
it's from I think a town in Italy, which my great grandparents came from or something like that. Similar to how Vito Corleone took his last name Corleone from a city or town in Italy. But yeah, so I believe it's correctly pronounced Prato, which interestingly enough, I was once interviewing Uli John Roth from the Scorpions, and I told him my name, and he's like, "Isn't your last name pronounced Prato after the town in Italy?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess,
okay.
yeah." And then yeah, but I'm just going to stick with Prato because
You've
I've
been
used that
going
all-
with
yeah.
Prato. Yes, I've heard you yourself
Yeah.
say it.
Yeah.
So
So
Megadeth.
that right there, so that right there is an exclusive.
That's an exclusive right there, man. I love it. You always provide the exclusives every time.
Yes, yeah.
So Megadeth's most commercially successful song is Symphony of Destruction from Countdown to Extinction. Countdown to Extinction, number 71 on Billboard 92. Tell us about the making of this song. This is great. Bassist Dave Ellison talks about it being written in between shooting hoops at the band's rehearsal spot.
Yeah, so David Ellison mentions how when they were I don't think they were even recording the album. They were just rehearsing for the album that became Countdown to Extinction. They would take breaks, and they were doing this in Phoenix, Arizona, which is very hot, so you can't stay outside for very long. But they would be jamming, working on something, and they would say, let's go outside and just take a break. We'll just shoot some hoops. They go out, shoot some hoops. Then Dave Mustaine would be like, all right, you guys, I'm going to go inside. I have something in my head. I'm going to work on something. I'll be back. And he'd go inside, come up with Symphony for Destruction. Then he'd go out and be playing a little bit. Then he'd say, you know, guys, hang on a second. I have an idea for another song. Hang on a second. He'd go back in and he would come up with, something else, sweating bullets he'd come up with. So it's, if you think about how I've always found it fascinating how certain people, they just can channel, the music just is almost like channeled through them. I mean, obviously, Eddie Van Halen is a great example of that. Jimi Hendrix, Randy Rhoads, all these great musicians. It's just like this music. It's almost like a faucet. Turn it on, turn it off, turn on. That's fascinating.
Endlessly fascinated by that. It's like they're superhuman. I mean, just because I could never do it, so I just wonder.
I'm so glad you said that, because something that I find fascinating too is like, now you take Dave Mustaine. He looks like a regular normal guy, right? But yet he comes up with all these great riffs. Now, how many times have you gone on and seen like a local band that sucks, that has horrible, musicianship, and every schlub there's like zillions of guitarists that can't do that, but there's just that one in a million that, is just that gifted, whether it be, like I said, Randy Rhoads, Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, and Dave Mustaine. I'm telling you, I was recently interviewed on David Ellefson's podcast, and something I said, which and I felt like this before even the recent death of also Ozzy Osbourne and this whole onslaught of, which I agree, Ozzy Osbourne was fantastic. He deserves all the accolades and everything. But I think it's going to take Dave Mustaine sadly passing away. When he passes away, then suddenly they're going to be like, oh, he was a genius, one of the greatest metal guitarists ever, one of the greatest riff writers ever, a underrated lyricist, songwriter. That's sadly what it seems like it takes nowadays for people to finally give people their due, which is kind of sad. You should be able to give people their due while they're still with us and you can enjoy it. But that's just the way I guess it works out.
With this genre of music, to be able to have that type of success commercially without selling yourself out, these songs are still genuine. They're still Megadeth songs. It's not like he was looking to get on the charts.
Right. And I mean, not only Megadeth, you got to think that he wrote a lot of those Metallica riffs on the first two albums, and a lot of those, like the song, the Four Horsemen, which is considered a Metallica classic. I believe he wrote the riff, he wrote everything, and that's widely considered one of Metallica's top riffs too. But that was Dave Mustaine.
One quote I was going to read, I forgot to, but I'll read it now. This is great. It talks about just how quickly Megadeth's popularity increased. You say here, quote, to give you an idea how quickly Megadeth's popularity increased, on October 11, 1986, they were opening for Motorhead at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. On June 13, 1987, they were headlining the same venue themselves.
People tend to forget, I would say in early 87, mid 87, Megadeth and Metallica were just about equal. Metallica had the top 30 album with Master of Puppets. It had just gone gold or maybe platinum. But see, the thing is, Metallica did not use MTV to their advantage. Which I always thought was very, which you got to give Metallica a lot of respect. They did not put out a single video, did not do a single video for their first three albums. It was on the Justice album, the fourth album, that they did the video for one.
Yeah, I remember that. That was the big story. No videos up until then.
Exactly. But Megadeth, they did make videos for Peace Sells. They did one for the Peace Sells title track, and also a great song called Wake Up Dead. And both those songs got played heavily on not on regular MTV regular hours so much, but on MTV's heavy metal specialty shows. They were heavily played.
Headbangers Ball, was that out at that time?
Even before that, in late '86, there was a forgotten show. It was because I remember coming back from high school, and at 3:30 or 3 o'clock, there was a half-hour show every afternoon called the Heavy Metal Half Hour or something. And they would just show you a half hour of just strictly metal videos. That was before Headbangers Ball. So that was a precursor kind of to Headbangers Ball. But Peace Sells was played heavily on that half hour show. That's how I really got into Megadeth, was through seeing that video. And then later in early 87 or spring of 87, that was when Wake Up Dead came out as the video. But yeah, so by like spring, summer of 87, Megadeth and also Metallica were pretty much neck and neck, because then also in early 88, Megadeth put out another album, So Far So Good So What. So they even had a third video, which was for Anarchy in the UK. So they were definitely using MTV more to their advantage at that point than you could say Metallica or even Slayer was at that point.
And the Symphony of Destruction video was on all the time.
Yes. That was in summer of 90. That was one of the most heavily played videos in the summer of 92. I remember that being on all the time in the summer of 1992. Yeah.
What are the lyrics about?
I think what Dave Mustaine says is it has to do a little bit with like we put people up on pedestals, but it's just like we're all pretty much glorified apes. You know, like if you look at if you listen to the lyrics, we put, you know, presidents up on high pedestals or even like celebrities up on high pedestals. But I mean, again, what's the difference between a president or someone else? I mean, I guess luck has a lot to do with it. You also have to have some pizzazz and also have some smarts and stuff. But who's to say who's better than someone else? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
There will be an intermission.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock Podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock Podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. Megadeth certainly survived the grunge era. Countdown to Extinction was big in 92. 1994's Euthanasia reached number 4 on Billboard. 2 more albums, 97's Cryptic Writings, which reached number 10. And then in 1999, they released Risk, which hit number 16. Chapter 23, titled Those Troublesome Mid-90s. What was the state of Megadeth during that period?
Well, it wasn't just Megadeth. What happened was after grunge and also alternative rock hit, a lot of the metal bands just, I don't know why they felt they had to change what they were doing. I would imagine it had to have been pressure from management and also their record companies. Suddenly now you see Megadeth wearing flannel shirts in videos. Metallica, it feels like they have to dress up like U2 for their Load and also Reload records. Anthrax switched singers at that point. Slayer, you got to give Slayer credit. They never really bowed down to alt rock or also grunge. You know, they pretty much stood the course. So you got to give Slayer credit. Megadeth never like they never like I forget who it was that I spoke to for the books. Oh, it was actually Richard Christie. So, you know, you got to give Dave Mustaine credit. Like, there was no Megadeth song where he's like crooning, like, you know, like what's his name? Eddie Vedder, you know?
Yep.
And, you know, and like, there's no Megadeth song with Dave Mustaine rapping, you know? It's like nothing like that, you know? They at least stayed pretty true. The only thing that Megadeth did similar to Metallica is suddenly their speedy tempos get slowed down. So it's kind of like a mid-tempo Black Sabbath Soundgarden type thing, which, you know, I mean, that's not really them being totally true to themselves. But that said, I'll be honest, I lost interest in actually Metallica. Megadeth, even those years, they at least had some songs that I could hear now and I still enjoy, and I think that they're worthwhile and they still hold up well. Whereas Metallica, I really honestly, after Master of Puppets, I just bow out. I mean, I liked Injustice for All when I was younger. That was the first tour I ever saw them live. I loved it at the time. But the Black Album, I remember like trying to like it and I just couldn't like it. Load and Reload, I never liked. You know, it just...
They tried some risky stuff. Speaking of risk, the Lulu album with Lou Reed.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, they came under immense fire for that. And like, although I'll be honest, I've never heard the whole thing. I'm a huge Lou Reed fan. I love Velvet Underground. I love Lou Reed's early 70s solo material. And you know, I can, that at least I can respect that. They're in a room with Lou Reed. They're just coming up with stuff. It's not so much forced. I mean, what came out was like a huge, giant, nut-filled turd.
Yeah.
But
no, I'm with you.
I respect. But you know, I mean, at least I give them credit that I give them credit that it wasn't like a forced thing. Like for instance, Load and also the album Reload was, where if you're not familiar with that album, if you have, do you actually have that album or?
I have Load. I don't think I have. I may have Reload. I know I have Load. The CD.
Okay, well. Do yourself a favor, take a look at the booklet of Load, and it's the most embarrassing. Like what it is they hooked up with Anton Corbijn, who did the Nirvana heart-shaped box video, and he also worked a lot with also U2 in the past. And suddenly they felt like they had to be like Bono doing like, a whole Vegas-y, like they have eyeliner on, they cut their hair, they're wearing all these like silver pan. It was so forced and so just bloody embarrassing. But it's something I talk about in the book that you got to give Metallica credit because the worst, well, I mean, I'm going to say the worst they got. I mean, like I'm saying that. Meanwhile, no one gives a shit what, like, I think Metallica's still selling out stadiums. So they obviously did the right thing. But I'm just saying, for me, as like a once Metallica fan, it's interesting how the worse they got, the bigger they became. You know,
Yeah, they're
that
huge. Yeah.
So they're almost like, you could say Metallica are almost like magicians. They
Well,
were
I
able
think
to.
they lost a lot of fans, but they gained a lot more with the change of sound. They gained more mainstream fans, I think.
Something I talk about in the book.
I love Until It Sleeps, Hero of the Day. I mean, those songs were great for rock radio.
Yeah, see, it's just at that point I'm on to, I'm listening to Soundgarden, Faith No More, then later on I'm into like Jeff Buckley. I'm just not into, and the thing too, like for me, those Metallica songs, I think they're just trying to sound like Soundgarden, so I'd rather just hear Soundgarden, or they're just doing like slow plodding things. I'd rather hear Black Sabbath Volume 4. And at least that's authentic and it's, the real thing.
Which is, I get what you're saying, which is why you appreciate Lulu more, because they just did something
Right, yeah,
that
I
was,
mean,
from an artistic standpoint, let's just try this and see what happens. It feels right.
I'll be the first one to say that Lulu to me is like that's like probably musical kryptonite to me, but at least I can
it's
but I
pretty
mean
brutal.
at least
Yeah.
I can listen to and not listen to it, but at least I can say, well, look, they got in a room, they hashed it out, whereas the other stuff, I don't know what the hell they were thinking.
Yeah. Your original plan was to cut the book off after the Risk album in '99. What changed your mind?
Because the Risk album is their Load, or it's their Music from the Elder, or it's their Van Halen 3.
Okay.
It is an album that should be deleted. It should
Yeah.
be erased. It should be forgotten. Put it in a bottle and throw it out in the ocean. Let it just float away.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the end of the period that you say is their best period.
Well, you see, that's the thing is in the late 90s. All right, so people widely consider the Rust in Peace lineup to be their definitive lineup, which is Dave Mustaine on vocals, guitar, David Ellefson on bass, Marty Friedman on guitar, and the late, great Nick Menza on drums. Now, I personally think that's a phenomenal lineup. Greg Prato's choice for greatest Megadeth lineup is the Peace Cells lineup. I'm sorry. I'll say that till the absolute day I die. But yeah, so the Rust in Peace lineup comes in 1990. Then by the late 90s, it's kind of the band's fracturing. Nick Menza leaves in 1997. They do Ozfest. They carry on with I think his name is Jimmy DeGrasso, who was in Y&T and Suicidal Tendencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they
Remember
carry
that
on
name.
for a bit. Then for the Risk album, that's Marty Friedman's last hurrah because he was going in a whole different direction. He was more into not just like alternative rock, but he was into like pop. He was into like pop music, which is kind of weird because he clearly wasn't always into pop music. Because if you hear what he was doing with Cacophony before Megadeth and the early Megadeth work, it's not pop music at all. So, but anyway, we all change when we get older. He wanted to do more of a pop thing. It rubs off on Risk a bit. But then in the middle of the tour for Risk, he has like what's called like a nervous breakdown where he has horrible anxiety attacks and he feels like he's going to have to just like drop off the tour, but he's able to pull it together barely. So he finishes the tour, but he gives notice. He's like, I'm going to leave, but find somebody. So they get Al Pitrelli, formerly of Alice Cooper's band, to come in. But yeah, so in 1999 is, I believe, or 2000, either 99 or 2000, is when Marty Friedman leaves. And that to me is just the end of the Rust in Peace lineup. People refer to that as the Rust in Peace lineup. So yes, now you no longer have Nick Menza nor Marty Friedman in the lineup anymore at that point.
Yeah. Then there was a hiatus thereafter.
After The World Needs a Hero, Dave Mustaine, yeah, through the course of Megadeth, he relapses every so often and has to go to rehab every so often, which I give him a world of credit that he is still with us. He was able to do that. I mean, that I always tip my hat to people if they have problems. It's very hard to admit you have a problem and to go do something about it. And to Dave Mustaine's credit, he's done it numerous times. So you got to give him a lot of credit that he, has done that. And
Sure.
yeah, so one of the many times he has fallen off the wagon, but he does the right thing, goes to rehab. He claims that he fell asleep. He had his like hand or something behind, well, I don't know how he had it, maybe behind his back. He fell asleep on a chair with like a metal rim or something like that, and it cut off the circulation to his hand. And he woke up. He did some kind of nerve damage. The same thing happened to Slash. I remember reading Slash's book, and he had a problem where it could be so extreme that sometimes they have to actually amputate your hand, if you could believe that. It's like that extreme. Yeah. But it wasn't, I guess, that severe with Dave Mustaine. But they did say that they didn't think he was going to ever use his hand, and it was out of the question that he was ever going to be able to play guitar again. But to Dave Mustaine's credit, he's a pretty stubborn gentleman, and he just didn't take no for an answer. And he slowly but surely taught himself how to play guitar again. But yeah, at that point, he just ended Megadeth abruptly. Just says, "No, I'm probably not going to be able to play again, so I'm just going to focus on family, maybe get into the management side of the music business." But Megadeth is over.
But they came back in '04.
Yeah, but then within a year he's back, and what's weird, and he does not have David Ellefson anymore. He has a whole new lineup. It was kind of weird that he just he retained the Megadeth name. He had a whole lawsuit thing going back and forth with also David Ellefson at the time. They have a falling out, but I don't even talk about it in this book because it only goes up to 2003. So,
The Booked on Rock podcast will be back after this.
Well, we're waiting.
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. The world's state-of-the-art speed metal band, the Megadeth story, 1983 to 2002. It's out now. Find it wherever books are sold. Look for it at your nearest bookstore. You can go to bookedonrock.com to find your nearest independent bookstore. And if they don't have a copy there, beat the shit out of them. And, oh, no, I'm sorry. No, just ask them politely to.
Yes. And we have it available as
stock
paperback, it's available as paperback, hardcover, Kindle, and also with most of my books, audio version narrated by me.
You are hooked on that, man. You love it. You love
It's
it.
all about paying the bills. You know what I'm saying? I have to pay my bills. I have to pay my mortgage. We have to do it.
Telling you, man. So let's talk about what's coming next, because we got something really cool coming in the fall.
Is called Alternative for the Masses, the 90s alt-rock revolution in oral history. So that means I'm going back to my roots in oral history, which is what my first few books were set up as, which is we have a subject, and then all the interviews I've done, we have a gentleman's name, and then he talks. We have someone else's name, he talks. You're getting the words straight from the horse's mouth of the people that were there. I describe it as a documentary, but in book form. It's about all those great 90s alternative rock bands, which I'll be honest, doing this book, I'm going to go on record. That was probably my favorite era of music ever. Because
yeah, I could tell you love that era.
Because me, like you, we were living it at the time. I was going to the shows. I was there the day that Soundgarden Super Unknown comes out. I'm there the day Blind Melon Soup comes out. The day Faith No More Angel Dust comes out, and I'm blown away. Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream.
It was an amazing time. Yeah.
All these albums that I still listen to this day hold up wonderfully. Bands that I could relate to, they were just like me. They just, they're like regular people. They're on stage. They're not doing this over-affected, rock star thing. But yet I'd go see them live, and it was some of the best shows I've ever seen.
Yeah, I never thought about it at the time, but just to look back now and clearly remembering watching videos by Warrant, Winger, and Slaughter one day, and then slowly but surely they're just working these videos in like Nirvana and Pearl Jam. You're seeing it take over so quickly.
Yeah, you are.
It was really wild to see the shift in rock and roll culture.
Yeah,
pop culture too. I mean, it became mainstream.
But it's funny. Some people tend to forget it did. The change did occur, but it was a little bit. I even remember it being very like one day we were watching videos by Poison and Warrant. The next day it's Nirvana and Pearl Jam. but it was a little bit of a phasing out period because if you think back, there's a period in 1992 where a lot of hair metal bands are scoring big hits still with like acoustic ballads. I'm thinking
I will
Mr.
tell you
Big to be yeah, Mr. Big to be
exactly.
with you,
Mr. Big to be with you. I remember that
Saigon
being
Kick.
played. Saigon
Yes.
Kick.
Yeah, Saigon Kick, and also even what's the other band that
Love is on the way.
The band Firehouse even had
Firehouse.
and
You're
also
so
Steel.
right.
I think Steelheart had a hit.
Mm-hmm.
That may have been 1991 though. That I don't know.
Could have
when
been
that
91.
was.
Trickster
Okay,
was
maybe that
around
was
91. There were Tricksters around 91.
wait, it's real. Also Ugly Kid Joe, Cats in the Cradle.
Yep.
Ah, horrible.
But I distinctly remember listening to the local radio station, New Haven radio station, 99 Rock, WPLR, and they were playing To Be With You by Mr. Big, and then it was followed by Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I'd like to think one day we'll see another kind of revolution type thing, but in my lifetime so far, I've never experienced anything like that. That it was from 91 through about 94, almost every month there is a classic album that came out, and sometimes just a few weeks apart. It wasn't even every month; it was like every few weeks.
Yeah, it was a great time.
It just, I mean, what I tend to compare it to, I was too young to have, or not even born yet with some of these eras, but I liken it to the mid to late 60s psychedelic period where you had Jimi Hendrix, you had Sgt. Pepper's, Cream, Janis Joplin, The Doors, like Stooges, all these legendary bands coming out, putting out all these great albums like every month. And then in the mid to late 70s, you had a lot of the punk bands, you had the Ramones, Sex Pistols, Clash. I mean, I guess you could say too, the late 70s or more early 80s, some of the best metal albums came out in that period. You had Van Halen 1, then you had the Ozzy stuff, Black Sabbath with
the
Dio,
British
you had
heavy
Iron
metal.
Maiden. Well, yeah, I mean, so there's certain eras where there's just like we just kind of get spoiled. We just take it for granted that we think we're just going to be assaulted with this great music. And then you find out a few years later when you get these like fourth-rate Iron Maidens and fifth-rate Nirvanas and seventh-rate whatever like psychedelic band you think of.
Pearl Jams,
Then you realize we had it pretty good for a while, but
hopefully it's a cyclical thing and eventually we'll come back around to it. But it's been a long time.
it will. So I forgot who I talked to for this book, but actually, maybe we shouldn't talk too much about this book since I'm going to come back and talk about this book, right?
Yeah, we'll tease it. We'll tease it.
But one thing, I'll actually give you one little taster. The one thing that someone said, which is pretty good, is I asked a lot of these people I interviewed for the book, like, do you think this could ever happen again? And one person, it was either Lou Barlow from Sebadoh or Corey Glover from the band Living Color. I interviewed both of them for the book. They both said, yes, it will happen again, but it's not going to sound anything. It's not going to resemble grunge at all. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be like something that you can't even think of. It'll be like a guy from hip hop merging his stuff with like shoegaze music. It's going to be something that original. And I'm like, that totally makes sense to me. It's not going to be someone ripping off Nirvana. It's not going to be someone ripping off Soundgarden or ripping off Nine Inch Nails. It's going to be someone that we can't even fathom what it is. So
yeah,
hopefully one day soon.
And it's usually it takes that one band or maybe a solo artist, but a band that breaks through and opens the door and the rest come in.
I mean, look at also Van Halen's first album. After that comes out, how many people now are copying David Lee Roth, copying Eddie Van Halen? That was like a Van Halen bomb that went off. That suddenly, everyone just was kind of them. You could say the same with Nirvana, the Beatles, the Ramones. There's always these bands every decade or every so often that just breaks down the doors and everyone either follows or they just copy.
Well, I'm looking forward. We'll talk about that book some more when we get closer to the release. Now, that's through our friends at Motor Books, right?
It is.
Okay,
indeed,
cool.
It is. Yeah, they did a great job. We worked. This book has been, I probably began work on this book about 2 years ago. It was completed about a year ago. We, took our time getting pictures and formatting it and everything. But I'm really happy with the way it came out. It's going to come out as a hardcover, also a Kindle or digital, and also, again, a audio version with me narrating.
Excellent. Yeah, shout out to Steve Roth. friend of
Yes.
the podcast from Motor
Great
Books,
guy.
and
Great guy.
They do a phenomenal job.
They do.
So happy for you that you're going to be teaming up with them. So, and by the way, thank you also for the support on Ultimate Guitar. We should also plug Ultimate Guitar's website.
Oh, sure, if you want.
Because we're the podcast is mentioned there often, so that's very cool.
Yes,
People should check it out. Ultimate-guitar.com.
Yeah, for people who don't know, I'm a writer for Ultimate Guitar, and we sometimes do news articles from your podcast, right?
Absolutely, often, not sometimes, man. It's much appreciated. So
Listen, keep the grade A content coming is all I'm going to say.
And you keep the lights on here, so that's how. And you didn't make fun of me for having Aaron Rodgers, because I teased about you being a Jets fan about having Aaron Rodgers, and I wished you the best of luck. Now I'm stuck with him with the Steelers. Now my team.
I'm telling you, you can make fun of the Jets all you want, because you have to laugh from. What's the saying? You have to laugh to keep from crying. Is that the?
Yeah. But here I am with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. I'm not too excited about it, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We shall see.
We'll see. I predict the Steelers will do better than the Jets, at least.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, Greg. Thanks, man.
Okay. Thanks again.
That's it. It's in the books.